Start recording. And I'm going to share my screen and show you how to find recordings. If you go into the Teams app and you go to Teams and then you choose, I have a lot of Teams because I have a lot of classes. The morning, Sean. You will see under General, you can see right now my recording has started. So if you go to Files, come on, it's being slow. Doesn't want to do it naturally.
Hi, teacher.
Good morning. How are you, Marwa?
Good morning, teacher. I'm fine, thank you.
Good. So if you go, I'm showing how to find recordings of class. So if you go into the Teams and then you go to Files, and then you will see at the bottom recordings. And here is where I have recorded classes. And that way, if you need to listen to it again, or you miss a class, that is where you can find the recording. Okay. All right. Hey, Cassie. Hi, Ali. All right, so let's pick up where we left off, which would be on chapter 10. Oh, yeah. Probably they will find their way to the trash. All right, we are on chapter 10 of 1,000 Splendid Suns. So we're going to be meeting in this chapter some new characters because now, of course, Miriam has moved to Kabul. And so she's going to be, hello, Fariba. She's going to be exposed to some new people, which
Sorry, teacher, I'm a little bit late.
That's okay. So she's going to be meeting some new people. And as you can imagine, for a girl, she's 15, who has gone through what she has gone through of late, it can be a little overwhelming to meet new people. She lived in a kolba by herself with her mother for all those years and only had her father to give her contact to the outside world. And then now she's just been forced into a marriage and moved across the country to Kabul. So meeting people is a little traumatic for her. But we are going to start meeting some new people that are going to come into play throughout the book. So this is an important chapter for that. All right, chapter 10. The first few days, Miriam hardly left her room. Good morning. She was awakened every dawn for prayer by the distant cry of azan, after which she crawled back into bed. She was still in bed when she heard Rashid in the bathroom, washing up, when he came into her room to check on her before he went to his shop. From her window, she watched him in the yard, securing his lunch in the rear carrier pack of his bicycle, then walking his bicycle across the yard and into the street. She watched him pedal away, saw his broad, thick-shouldered figure disappear around the turn at the end of the street. For most of the days, Miriam stayed in bed, feeling adrift and forlorn. Sometimes she went downstairs to the kitchen, ran her hands over the sticky, grease-stained counter with vinyl-flowered curtains that smelled like burned meals. She looked through the ill-fitting drawers at the mismatched spoons and knives, the colander, and the chipped wooden spatulas. These would be instruments of her new daily life, all of it reminding her of the havoc that had struck her life, making her feel uprooted, displaced, like an intruder on someone else's life. At the kolba, her appetite had been predictable, Here, her stomach rarely growled for food. Sometimes she took a plate of leftover white rice and a scrap of bread to the living room by the window. From there, she could see the roofs of the one-story houses on their street. She could see into their yards, too, the women working laundry lines and shoeing their children, chickens pecking at dirt, the shovels and spades, the cows tethered to trees. She thought longingly of all the summer nights that she and Nana had slept on the flat roof of the kolba, looking at the moon glowing over Goldeman. The night so hot, their skirts would cling to their chests like a wet leaf to a window. She missed the winter afternoons of reading in the kolba with Mula Faizula, the clink of icicles falling on her roof from the trees, the crows cawing outside from snow-burdened branches. Alone in the house, Miriam paced restlessly from the kitchen to the living room, up the steps to her room and down again. She ended up back in her room, doing her prayers or sitting on the bed, missing her mother, feeling nauseated and homesick. It was with the sun's westward crawl that Miriam's anxiety really ratcheted up. Her teeth rattled when she thought of the night, the time when Rashid might at last decide to do to her what husbands do to their wives. She lay in bed, racked with nerves, as he ate alone downstairs. He always stopped by her room and poked his head in. You can't be sleeping already. It's only 7. Are you awake? Answer me. Come now. He pressed on until, from the dark, Marian said, I'm here. He slid down and sat in her doorway. From her bed, she could see his large framed body, his long legs, the smoke swirling around his hook-nosed profile, the amber tip of his cigarette brightening and dimming. He told her about his day, a pair of loafers he had custom made for the deputy foreign minister, who, Rashid said, bought shoes only from him, an order for sandals from a Polish diplomat and his wife. He told her of the superstitions people had about shoes, that putting them on a bed invited death into the family, that a quarrel would follow if one put on the left shoe first. Unless it was done unintentionally on a Friday, he said, and did you know it's supposed to be a bad omen to tie shoes together and hang them from a nail? Rashid himself believed none of this. In his opinion, the superstitions were largely a female preoccupation. He passed on other things he heard on the streets, like how the American president, Richard Nixon, had resigned over a scandal. Okay, so that line is one of those clues to kind of the setting of time. Okay, so have you guys heard of Richard Nixon? In this, yes, no, in history class? So Richard Nixon was a United States president in the 1960s. No. Who, what? Not quite so good, yeah. So when he was, his political party broke into the offices of the opposition potential president, and it was called Watergate, if anybody's heard of Watergate. So it was a huge political scandal, the presidency, and he was going to be impeached, and he eventually, he resigned. And then his vice president took over the presidency. So this was in the 1960s. So that gives you that era. Yeah. One of Nixon. Yeah. So President Nixon is a very famous president in the United States for a really bad reason. I used to call him Tricky Dick. Yeah. So, okay. Miriam, who had never heard of Nixon or the scandal that had forced him to resign, did not say anything back. She waited anxiously for Rashid to finish talking, to crush his cigarette and take his leave. Only when she heard him cross the hallway, heard his door open and close, only then would the metal fist gripping her belly let go. Then one night he crushed his cigarette and instead of saying goodnight, leaned against the doorway. Are you ever going to unpack that thing? He said, motioning with his head toward her suitcase. He crossed his arms. I figured you might need some time, but this is absurd. A week's gone and, well, as of tomorrow morning, I expect you to start behaving like a wife. Famidi, is that understood? Miriam's teeth began to chatter. I need an answer. Yes. Good, he said. What did you think? That this is a hotel? That I'm some kind of hotel keeper? Well, il ala ulala. What did I say about the crying, Miriam? What did I say to you about the crying? The next morning, after Rashid left for work, Miriam unpacked her clothes and put them in the dresser. She drew a pail of water from the well and, with a rag, washed the windows of her room and the windows to the living room downstairs. She swept the floors, beat the cobwebs fluttering in the corners of the ceiling. She opened the windows to air the house. She set 3 cups of lentils to soak in a pot, found a knife and cut some carrots and a pair of potatoes, left them too to soak. She reached for flour, found it in the back of one of the cabinets behind the row of dirty spice jars, and made fresh dough, kneading it the way Nana had shown her, pushing the dough with the heel of her hand, folding the outer edge, turning it, and pushing it away again. Once she had floured the dough, she wrapped it in a moist cloth, put on a hijab, and set out for the communal tandoor. Rashid had told her where it was, down the street, a left, then a quick right, but all Miriam had to do was follow the flock of women and children who were headed the same way. The children, Miriam saw, chasing after their mothers or running ahead of them, wore shirts patched and patched again. They wore trousers that looked too big or too small, sandals with ragged straps that flapped back and forth. They rolled discarded old bicycle tires with sticks. Their mothers walked in groups of 3 or 4, some in burqas, others not. Miriam could hear their high-pitched chatter, their spiraling laughs. As she walked with her head down, she caught bits of their banter, which seemingly always had to do with sick children or lazy, ungrateful husbands. As if the meals cooked themselves. Walla Obila, never a moment's rest. And he says to me, I swear it, it's true, he actually says to me, this endless conversation, the tone plaintive but oddly cheerful, flew around and around in a circle. On it went, down the street, around the corner, in line at the tandoor. Husbands who gambled, husbands who doted on their mothers and wouldn't spend a rupiah on them, the wives. Miriam wondered how so many women could suffer the same miserable luck to have married, all of them, such dreadful men. Or was this a wifely game that she did not know about, a daily ritual like soaking rice or making dough? Would they expect her to join in? In the tandoor line, Miriam caught sideways glances shot at her, heard whispers. Her hands began to sweat. She imagined they all knew that she'd been born a harami, a source of shame to her father and his family. They all knew that she'd betrayed her mother and disgraced herself. With a corner of her hijab, she dabbed at the moisture above her upper lip and tried to gather her nerves. For a few minutes, everything went well. Then someone tapped on her shoulder. Miriam turned around and found a light-skinned, plump woman wearing a hijab like her. She had short, wiry black hair and a good-humored, almost perfectly round face. Her lips were much fuller than Miriam's, the lower one slightly droopy, as though dragged down by the big dark mole just below the lip line. She had big greenish eyes that shone at Miriam with an inviting glint. You're Rashid Jan's new wife, aren't you? The woman said, smiling widely. The one from Herat. You're so young. Miriam Jan, isn't it? My name is Fariba. I live on your street, 5 houses to your left, and the one with the green door. This is my son, Noor. So Fariba is a character that you should keep in mind going forward because you will encounter her more. The boy at her side had a smooth, happy face and wiry hair like his mother's. There was a patch of black hairs on the lobe of his left ear. His eyes had a mischievous, reckless light in them. He raised his hand. Salam, Kalayan. Noor is 10. I have an older boy, too, Ahmad. He's 13, Noor said. 13 going on 40, the woman Fariba laughed. My husband's name is Hakim, she said. He's a teacher here in Demazang. You should come by sometime. We'll have a cup. And then suddenly, as if emboldened, the other women pushed past Fariba and swarmed Miriam, forming a circle around her with alarming speed. So you're Rashid Jan's young bride. How do you like Kabul? I've been to Herat. I have a cousin there. Do you want a boy or a girl first? The minarets. Oh, what beauty. What a gorgeous city. Boy is better, Miriam Jan. They carry the family name. Bah, boys get married and run off. Girls stay behind and take care of you when you're old. We heard you were coming. Have twins, one of each. Then everyone's happy. Miriam backed away. She was hyperventilating. Her ears buzzed, her pulse fluttered. Her eyes darted from one face to another. She backed away again, but there was nowhere to go. She was in the center of a circle. She spotted Fariba, who was frowning, who saw that she was in distress. Let her be, Fariba was saying. Move aside, let her be, you're frightening her. Miriam clutched the dough close to her chest and pushed through the crowd around her. Where are you going, Hamshira? She pushed away. She pushed until somehow she was in the clear, and then she ran up the street. It wasn't until she reached the intersection that she realized she'd run the wrong way. She turned around and ran back in the other direction, head down, tripping once and scraping her knee badly, then up again and running, bolting past the women. What's the matter with you? You're bleeding, Hamshira. Miriam turned one corner, then another. She found the correct street, but suddenly could not remember which was Rashid's house. She ran up, then down the street, panting, near tears now, began trying doors blindly. They were locked. Others opened only to reveal unfamiliar yards, barking dogs, and startled chickens. She pictured Rashid coming home to find her still searching this way, her knee bleeding, lost on her own street. Now she did start crying. She pushed on doors, muttering panicked prayers, her face moist with tears, until one opened and she saw, with relief, the outhouse, the well, the tool shed. She slammed the door behind her and turned the bolt. Then she was on all fours next to the wall, retching. When she was done, she crawled away, sat against the wall, her legs splayed before her. She had never in her life felt so alone. When Rashid came home that night, he brought with him a brown paper bag. Miriam was disappointed that he did not notice the clean windows, the swept floors, the missing cobwebs, but he did look pleased that she had already set his dinner plate on a clean sulfur spread on the living room floor. I made dal, Miriam said. Good, I'm starving. She poured water for him from the aftawa to wash his hands with. As he dried with a towel, she put before him a steaming bowl of dal and a plate of fluffy white rice. This was the first meal she had cooked for him, and Miriam wished she had been in a better state when she made it. She'd still been shaken from the incident at the tandoor as she cooked, and all day she had fretted about the dal's consistency, its color, worried that he would think she'd stirred it too much ginger or not enough turmeric. He dipped his spoon into the gold-colored dal. Miriam swayed a bit. What if he was disappointed or angry? What if he pushed his plate away in displeasure? Careful, she managed to say. It's hot. Rashid pursed his lips and blew, then put the spoon into his mouth. It's good, he said. A little undersalted, but good. Maybe better than good, even. Relieved, Miriam looked on as he ate. A flare of pride caught her off guard. She had done well. Maybe better than good, even. And it surprised her, this thrill she felt over his small compliment. The day's earlier unpleasantness receded a bit. Tomorrow is Friday, Rashid said. What do you say I show you around? Around Kabul? No, Calcutta. Miriam blinked. It's a joke. Of course Kabul. Where else? He reached into the brown paper bag. But first, something I have to tell you. He fished a sky blue burqa from the bag. The yards of pleated cloth spilled over his knees when he lifted it. He rolled up the burqa, looked at Miriam. I have customers, Miriam, men who bring their wives to my shop. The women come uncovered. They talk to me directly, look me in the eye without shame. They wear makeup and skirts that show their knees. Sometimes they even put their feet in front of me. The women do, for measurements, and their husbands stand there and watch. They allow it. They think nothing of a stranger touching their wives' bare feet. They think they're being modern men, intellectuals, on account of their education, I suppose. They don't see that they're spoiling their own nong and namus, their honor and pride. He shook his head. Mostly they live in the richer parts of Kabul. I'll take you there. You'll see. But they're here too, Miriam, in this very neighborhood, these soft men. There's a teacher living down the street. Hakim is his name, and I see his wife Fariba all the time walking the streets alone with nothing on her head but a scarf. It embarrasses me, frankly, to see a man who's lost control of his wife. He fixed Miriam with a hard glare. But I'm a different breed of man, Miriam. Where I come from, one wrong look, one improper word, and the blood is spilled. Where I come from, a woman's face is her husband's business only. I want you to remember that. Do you understand? Miriam nodded. When he extended the bag to her, she took it. The earlier pleasure over his approval of her cooking had evaporated. In its stead, a sensation of shrinking. This man's will felt to Miriam as imposing and immovable as the Sadiko Mountains looming over Galduman. Rashid, pass the paper bag to her. We have an understanding then. Now let me have some more of that doll. Oh, big day for Miriam. Yikes. Okay, let me see if I am right in thinking that we had started something here. I have to get on the right one. Yeah, okay. So do you all remember that we had started in the kids here in the US, we had started in OneNote, the elements of fiction, right? For 1,000 Splendid Suns. Yeah, okay. So what I would like to do is go back into that now and just add Rashid, add the fact that she's in Kabul. I would definitely add Fariba as well, because she will start to become a key character later. So let's take a few minutes and then I can read chapter 11, but let's take a few minutes to make sure we have some characters in here, okay? So you all can be adding in the collaboration space. That means everybody gets to add. We can also, we can probably also start adding to themes, right? We're starting to get a sense of what's happening in the story that might be kind of the bigger picture being illustrated by the story. And for the people in Kabul, I'm trying to remember what we did with that one. Let's see. Mowing a lawn out there, something. Trying to remember, where were we writing it for the Kabul students? I know we were doing it, but I can't. Yeah, and it must have been in Word, and I'm trying to remember. I'm sorry, what, Ali?
And then I told you that I'm in that page. 1,000 Splendor.
Okay. Yeah.
Elements
In
of
the
fiction.
folder, right.
1,000 Suns.
That's right.
Elements
I'm
of
looking in the
fiction.
wrong place. Perfect. Thank you.
Welcome.
See, sometimes I need help from my students. Right. Yeah. Okay, so I have to go in the Kabul folder. That's my problem. All right. Here we go. Okay. Oops. Okay, so what are we going to add? And I'm opening up the one for Afghanistan here. I mean, for Kabul people. I'm gonna share the screen just in case you guys can't easily get into it. Does anybody in Kabul need me to share the link to the document again? If you do, send me a chat or speak up. I can't see everybody at the moment. I can see Ali is in the document. So you guys should be in your OneNote. What are we gonna add? Why don't we start with character or the setting? What are we adding? Well, let's start with the setting. Oh, you mean, what'd you say, famous people? Oh, Richard Nixon? The what? Oh, no. Where are we, people? What? Yeah, in setting. Where are we now? She's in a different city. Yeah, she'd been in Herat, right? And now she is in Kabul. Yes, and we need to add Kabul. And that's overwhelming for Miriam, right? Because first of all, Herat is smaller anyway, and then she was living in this Kabul, and now she is in this, capital city. All right, so they're now in Kabul. Famous people. Yes. You can, yeah, events or the wedding. Yeah. So the plot, we haven't done much with plot yet, have we? Yeah, and Ali, feel free to type in. It seems that others aren't in. I'm going to put the link in to Teams, to the Teams chat in case that will help people get in. But feel free, Ali, to type in anything you want in here. Let's see. Yeah, so the plot, for the plot, we'd have to, I don't know where you are on yours, but we'd kind of have to start from the beginning, right? I think part of the plot that's important is even Nana calling Miriam a harami, right? When she breaks the tea set. Yes, the only famous person we've encountered yet is the American president, Richard Nixon. What's he doing in the book? Good question. What's he doing in the book? Did you not hear me read that part? You might have come in late. Why is he in the book? Time setting, right? It's also showing us a little bit about the character of Rashid. He's getting information. So remember how the only way that Miriam got information was from whom when she lived in the Kolba was from Jalil, her father. Okay, now what's happening is she's getting it from Rashid, right? So the resignation of Richard Nixon, Richard Nixon was globally famous because he was the United States president who had to resign because he'd done something illegal. Go figure. What? A lot of presidents. Yes. Yeah, sadly. Okay, so, oh good, you're adding, is that the neighborhood, Ali, that you just added? That they live in Kabul? Yeah. Okay. And then certainly I would add to the setting Rashid's house, right? Because that's very different for her. Now she's in this 2-story house. She's now got her own kitchen. She has her own bedroom. And, you know, they have a little yard. So this is a different environment for her than she had been growing up in. So there's a lot of change for Miriam very, very quickly. She lost her mother. She got married to a very large man who's a lot older and she's completely scared of. Good. Did you look it up? Yeah. So it's 1974. So there you go. Lucy looked up when Richard Nixon resigned. Yeah. So this would have been, 74, 75. Yeah. Probably 74 right now because it sounds like it would have just happened. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. He resigned. If he hadn't resigned, they were going to impeach him, which would have been a lot more embarrassing. So he resigned. Okay, so now we know it's 1974, right? Who are we going to add as characters? Yeah, Fariba, but even before that, I would add Rashid, right? Is there anybody typing in here? So what do we want to say about Rashid? He's a very traditional man, we've just discovered, very conservative, right? What's interesting about that is he's not necessarily terribly religious, but he is conservative in the idea that, you know, a wife has a particular role in life and should be completely controlled by her husband. Yeah. So that kind of traditional. What else do we know about him? He likes smoking. This is true. He smokes. What's his profession? Yeah, he owns a shoemaking shop. Yeah, he makes shoes, and apparently it's quite successful.
Miss,
Yes, Ellie. Yes. Want to talk? We're going to learn all kinds of things about Rashid that we wish we never knew. Okay. He's in his 40s, right? Yes. Shoemaker. I'm going to say successful shoemaker. We're having Wi-Fi. Yes, Nazanin.
Okay, can you hear me, teacher?
Yes.
Teacher, sorry, but can you explain somehow about plot that what plot is in a story and how we can understood the plot in a story, teacher? I need some information about this.
Absolutely. Let's talk about plot in a story. So plot is the sequence of events that take place in the story, and they have to go in a particular order. The author has designed the story to have a particular flow, right? One event has to follow the next, and that is the plot, right? So for example, let's see. I'm going to type it in here. Miriam breaks Nana's teapot. And Nana calls her a harami, right? Why does that matter? Yeah. They're ashamed of you, right? Yeah. Yeah, so that sets up the idea that she's now discovered for the first time that the fact that her parents aren't married is shameful. The fact that she was born is shameful, right? Okay. So, and then Nana prevents Miriam from going to school, right? On her 15th birthday, 15th birthday, what does she do on her 15th birthday?
Okay, she got married, teacher.
Yes, she did. That's well, not long after. First, she goes to Jalil's house. So Jalil visits on Thursdays, and then on Thursdays, and then on Miriam's 15th birthday, she goes to Jalil's house, right? Yeah. House. And then he leaves her out there, and when she returns back to the Kolba, what does she discover?
Yeah, she saw that
Her mom
mother
yes, committed suicide. Yeah, is hanging from a tree. Yeah. So do you see how it's the sequence of events, one that follows the next is very purposeful, right? So Nana commits suicide. And so if Nana hadn't done that, she would, Miriam would have just lived back at the Kolba, right? But because Nana commits suicide, that leads to Jalil's wives arranging a marriage for her, right? And purposely arranging a marriage for her with somebody who lives in, across the country, right? They have gotten rid of this shame in the form of Miriam to the other side of the country. So that's what plot is a purposeful series of events. You can kind of think of it if as action, kind of the action of the story. But you know, depending on how much action there is in the story, this one has clear steps that are taken that are quite physical, right? And so now, so then Miriam marries, Rashid and moves to Kabul. So that's plot, Nazanin. It's how the author chooses the series of events that take place very purposefully in order to tell the story, but also that also kind of then feeds into something we could talk about next, which is themes, right? So what are we talking about? What is he teaching us about in this book?
Okay, teacher, understood. So, teacher, I think we have a relationship between plot and theme in the story, yeah? So, by plot, we
Yes.
can understand, I think, the theme of the story, actually.
Right. Yeah, that all connects together to the way the author creates his characters and the sequence of events play into a theme of what he is trying to communicate to us. So at this point in time, what might be one of the themes that Hosseini is flushing out in this story for us? Of Miriam, yeah. So
Oh
he's
my
trying to
God,
tell us that
what was
Rashid
in it?
is going to have control of Miriam. So if you were to broaden that into a theme, we could just even say women's rights in Afghanistan. Yeah. Yes. Life of the average woman in Afghanistan. Right. Okay. Okay. Just even roles of men and women, right? Because even if you go back to Jalil having 3 wives, right? Women don't have 3 husbands, so there's definitely definite roles for women. And you're right, class makes a difference, right? So I don't know if you all in Kabul know what I mean when I say class, but economics and let's see, mostly economics is what really creates class. The more money you have, the more power you have, the more freedom you have, right? Generally speaking. So showing the difference between what a shamed Harami, a child born out of wedlock, the different circumstance she faces than Jalil's other children, right? Very different. So it's also showing us class differences. And, you know, this story is, yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, teacher. So, do we have any central theme in a story or no? In each part of the story, we can find a different theme. What? Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know that I've ever read a story, Nazanin, that has only one theme. I do think that the overarching theme in this book is the plight of women in Afghanistan. When different political authority takes place, whether it is individually by a father or husband, or whether it is by a government. And so very definitely this story focuses on the plight of women in Afghanistan. But I would also say that while this story takes place in Afghanistan, it is not, it still represents in many ways the plight of women all over the world, right? The kind of secondary role that we often are forced to play. So it's simply a good illustration of one location where this is sometimes in the extreme, but is certainly an issue pretty much everywhere, including the United States. Not to the same degree, but there's definitely been women over generations that have been fighting for more say in government, more say in business, more say over our own bodies. That's a big fight going on right now in this country. So, you know, it is a theme that's representative in just about every country in the world. And it is so reading this story is a reminder of what is happening specifically in Afghanistan, but also elsewhere. So, okay. So we're also going to find sub-themes in it, you know, and education, for example, will be a sub-theme. We've already gotten a hint that Hakim is a teacher, okay, and Hakim and Fariba are going to play a larger role later in the book. But we've already gotten that hint that he's a teacher, and we're going to see how that plays out, because education is definitely a sub-theme. So there's an overarching theme of the plight of women and then sub-themes that we can encounter. Okay. Anybody else have anything to add? Rashid, you can add more about Rashid. I'm going to put Fariba and not Hakim on here. So I'm typing into their Word doc. So you guys need to be typing into the OneDrive one or OneNote one. Fariba and Hakim. Okay, and we'll flush those out. Does anybody have any other questions at this point? Yeah, Paula has a question. Kabul, Kabul. She was in Herat, which was a smaller city way in the western part of the country, and she has moved to Kabul with Rashid, which is a much bigger city. Her father is in Herat. Yes. Father and the 3 wives are in Herat. Anybody else with a question? A comment? Can you guys see how overwhelmed Miriam would be being in Kabul now? Right, with a stranger as a husband and all of the women hovering around her at the town door. A little overwhelming. Yeah. Okay. See how long 11 is. Yeah. You could totally see how Miriam would struggle to handle it. Yeah. All right, I'm going to read chapter 11. It is not terribly long, so I think we can get through it in the next 15 minutes, and that will end us for the week. As a reminder to Kabul students, we don't have our morning class tomorrow because it's a holiday for us. So see you again on Monday. Just as oops. Fariba. Fariba. There we go. Okay. All right. Chapter 11. Miriam had never before worn a burqa. Rashid, do you guys know what a burqa is? I know Mohammed knows one. It is a covering for women from head to toe, and you look through like a little, yeah, you remember when you did the background? Okay. Miriam had never before worn a burqa. Rashid had to help her put it on. The padded headpiece felt tight and heavy on her skull, and it was strange seeing the world through a mesh screen. She practiced walking around the room in it and kept stepping on the hem and stumbling. The loss of peripheral vision was unnerving, and she did not like the suffocating way the pleated cloth kept pressing against her mouth. So peripheral vision is to the side, right? So she was like had blinders on. You'll get used to it, Rashid said. With time, I'll bet you'll even like it. They took a bus to a place Rashid called the Sharonel Park, where children pushed each other on swings and slapped volleyballs over ragged nets tied to tree trunks. They strolled together and watched boys fly kites, Miriam walking beside Rashid, tripping now and then on the burqa's hem. For lunch, Rashid took her to eat in a small kebab house near a mosque he called the Hijab Yagub. The floor was sticky and the air smoky. The walls smelled faintly of raw meat, and the music, which Rashid described to her as logari, was loud. The cooks were thin boys who fanned skewers with one hand and swatted gnats with the other. Miriam, who had never been inside a restaurant, found it odd at first to sit in a crowded room with so many strangers, to lift her burqa and put morsels of food into her mouth. A hint of the same anxiety as the day the tandoor stored in her stomach. But Rashid's presence was of some comfort, and after a while, she did not mind so much the music, the smoke, even the people, and the burqa. She learned to her surprise was also comforting. It was like a one-way window. Inside it, she was an observer, buffered from the scrutinizing eyes of strangers. She no longer worried that people knew with a single glance all the same shameful secrets of her past. On the streets, Rashid named various buildings with authority. This was the American Embassy, he said, that the Foreign Ministry. He pointed to cars, said their names and where they were made. Soviet Volgas, American Chevrolets, German Opels. Which is your favorite, he asked. Miriam hesitated, pointed to a Volga, and Rashid laughed. Kabul was far more crowded than the little that Miriam had seen of Herat. There were fewer trees and fewer garrus pulled by horses, but more cars, taller buildings, more traffic lights, and more paved roads. And everywhere Miriam heard the city's peculiar dialect. Deer was yan instead of yo. I'm totally pronouncing this wrong, I'm sure, people in Kabul. Sister became Hamshira instead of Hamshira, and so on. From a street vendor, Rashid bought her ice cream. It was the first time she'd eaten ice cream, and Miriam had never imagined that such tricks could be played on a palate. She devoured the entire bowl, the crushed pistachio topping, the tiny rice noodles at the bottom. She marveled at the bewitching texture, the lapping sweetness of it. They walked on to a place called Kote Morga, Chicken Street. It was a narrow, crowded bazaar in the neighborhood that Rashid said was one of Kabul's wealthier ones. Around here is where foreign diplomats live, rich businessmen, members of the royal family, that sort of people, not like you and me. I don't see any chickens, Miriam said. That's the one thing you can't find on Chicken Street, Rashid laughed. The street was lined with shops and little stalls that sold lambskin hats and rainbow-colored chapans. Rashid stopped to look at an engraved silver dagger in one shop and, in another, at an old rifle that the shopkeeper assured Rashid was a relic from the First War against the British. And I'm Moish Dayan, Rashid muttered. He half smiled, and it seemed to Miriam that this was a smile meant only for her, a private, married smile. They strolled past carpet shops, handicraft shops, pastry shops, flower shops, and shops that sold suits for men and dresses for women, and in them, behind lace curtains, Miriam saw young girls sewing buttons and ironing collars. From time to time, Rashid greeted a shopkeeper he knew, sometimes in Farsi, other times in Pashto. As they shook hands and kissed on the cheek, Miriam stood a few feet away. Rashid did not wave her over, did not introduce her. He asked her to wait outside an embroidery shop. I know the owner, he said. I'll just go in for a minute, say my salam. Miriam waited outside in the crowded sidewalk. She watched the cars crawling up Chicken Street, threading through the horde of hawkers and pedestrians, honking at children and donkeys who wouldn't move. She watched the bored-looking merchants inside their tiny stalls, smoking or spitting into brass spittoons, their faces emerging from the windows now and then to peddle textiles, and fur-collared Pushtun coats to passers-by. It was the women who drew Miriam's eyes the most. The women in this part of Kabul were a different breed from the women in the poorer neighborhoods. like the one where she and Rashid lived, where so many of the women covered fully. These women were, what was the word Rashid had used? Modern. Yes, modern Afghan women married to modern Afghan men who did not mind that their wives walked along among strangers with makeup on their faces and nothing on their heads. Miriam watched them cantering uninhibited down the street, sometimes with a man, sometimes alone, sometimes with rosy-cheeked children who wore tiny shoes and watches with leather bands, who walked bicycles with high-rise handlebars and gold-colored spokes. Unlike the children in Demazang, who bore sandfly scars on their cheeks and rolled old bicycle tires with sticks. These women were all swinging handbags and rustling skirts. Miriam even spotted one smoking behind the wheel of a car. Their nails were long, polished pink or orange, their lips red as tulips. They walked in high heels and quickly, as if on perpetually urgent business. They wore dark glasses, and when they breezed by, Miriam caught a whiff of their perfume. She imagined that they all had university degrees, that they worked in office buildings, behind desks of their own, where they typed and smoked and made important telephone calls to important people. These women mystified Miriam. They made her aware of her own lowliness, her plain looks, her lack of aspirations, her ignorance of so many things. Then Rashid was tapping her on the shoulder and handing her something. Here. It was a dark maroon silk shawl with beaded fringes and edges embroidered with gold thread. Do you like it? Miriam looked up. Rashid did a touching thing then. He blinked and averted her gaze. Miriam thought of Jalil, of the emphatic, jovial way in which he'd pushed his jewelry at her, the overpowering cheerfulness that left room for no response but meek gratitude. Nana had been right about Jalil's gifts. They had been half-hearted tokens of penance, insincere, corrupt gestures meant more for his own appeasement than hers. This shawl, Miriam saw, was a true gift. It's beautiful, she said. That night, Rashid visited her room, but instead of smoking in the doorway, he crossed the room and sat beside her where she lay on the bed. The springs creaked as the bed tilted to his side. There was a moment of hesitation, and then his hand was on her neck, his thick fingers slowly pressing the knobs at the back of it. His thumb slid down and was now stroking the hollow above her collarbone, then the flesh beneath it. Miriam began shivering. His hand crept lower, still lower, his fingernails catching in the cotton of her blouse. I can't, she croaked, looking at his moonlit profile, his thick shoulders and broad chest, the tuft of gray hair protruding from his open collar. His hand was on her right breast now, squeezing it hard through the blouse, and she could hear him breathing deeply through the nose. He slid under the blanket beside her. She could feel his hand working at his belt, at the drawstring of her trousers. Her own hands clenched the sheets in fistfuls. He rolled on top of her, wriggled and shifted, and she let out a whimper. Miriam closed her eyes, gritted her teeth. The pain was sudden and astonishing. Her eyes sprang open. She sucked air through her teeth and bit on the knuckle of her thumb. She slung her free hand over Rashid's back, and her fingers dug at his shirt. Rashid buried his face into her pillow, and Miriam stared wide-eyed at the ceiling above his shoulder, shivering, lips pursed, feeling the heat of his quick breaths on her shoulder. The air between them smelled of tobacco, of the onions and grilled lamb they had eaten earlier. Now and then his ear rubbed against her cheek, and she knew from the scratchy feel that he had shaved it. When it was done, he rolled off her, panting. He dropped his forehead over his brow. In the dark, she could see the blue hands of his watch. They lay that way for a while, on their backs, not looking at each other. There is no shame in this, Miriam, he said, slurring a little. It's what married people do. It's what the Prophet himself and his wives did. There is no shame. A few moments later, he pushed back the blanket and left the room, leaving her with the impression of his head on her pillow, leaving her to wait out the pain down below, to look at the frozen stars in the sky and a cloud that draped the face of the moon like a wedding veil. Some honeymoon. Okay. Any questions? No? Everybody understanding the story well? Is it helping if I read it?
Yeah, teacher. Yeah. Yeah, teacher.
Yes,
understood.
it's amazing.
Okay, good. All right, well, I'm not gonna give any homework this weekend, because there's so many people that are sick, including in Kabul. I don't want people to feel overwhelmed about getting behind. Okay, so I'm going to let you guys have and we have a 3-day weekend. So, yeah. So we're going to pick up where we left off on Monday. If you haven't added your words to the vocabulary list, you do need to do that. I have not checked that, but you do need to do that because you will have a vocabulary quiz on Monday. Okay. And if
Okay.
anybody has any questions, they can always chat me too at any point. And if you guys in Kabul, if any of your classmates contact you, if you can let them know we did record this, and maybe help them figure out how to see it, or have them contact me and I might be able to attach a recording of what we've read. Okay?
Okay.
All right. I hope all of you stay
Okay, teacher.
healthy.
Okay, thank you.
Miss,
Okay. Yes.
I have to say something. One
Yeah.
of our teachers in Kabul, he was trying to join our classes.
Yeah. And he